Hey, it's Alex. Today we're going to discuss some not very obvious ways to describe books, films and performances. And before we begin, I'd like to ask you to think back to a book, film or performance that you really enjoyed and think why you liked it. How would you describe it? Make a mental note of that or an actual note, and we'll come back to it at the end of the series. That's a NAP poster for a book, and just to get some vocab out of the way, let's look at the question above. Have you ever wondered what it's really like behind bars? And behind bars is an informal way of saying in prison, in jail. And of the book, it's a bit of a stretch. Is interesting because a stretch can refer informally to a period of time you spend in prison, but also a bit of a stretch means that something's an exaggeration. So we say that something's a bit of a stretch when we mean it's an exaggeration, it's too far-fetched, and it's basically the act of stretching the truth, you know. For instance, she can paint quite well, but it's a bit of a stretch to say she's the next Picasso. He's not the nicest guy, but calling him a psychopath is a bit of a stretch. So as you've probably gathered, this book is about life in prison and it exposes the horrors of prison system. So The Guardian says it's shocking, scathing and entertaining. So let's break that down. Shocking is quite simple, it's disturbing, offensive to a lot of people, and we can say shocking news, a shocking plot twist, shocking content, and did you know that there's a colour shocking pink? Scathing means severely critical and disrespectful. For example, you can say scathing criticism, a scathing remark, a scathing comment. So basically it means very critical. And you can also say a scathing attack on somebody, for instance, a scathing attack on the government. New York Times was particularly scathing about his performance.
Jean-Luc Godard wrote a scathing attack on 21 major French directors.
In its breathtakingly scathing review, The Quietist wrote that
we learn a shocking secret.
The Shawls learned shocking truths.
Hitchcock's promotional efforts focused wholly on alluding to the film's shocking twists and content without giving away any details.
Next up is entertaining, which is a synonym to funny, amusing, basically making you laugh. Next one, thought-provoking. Notice how the T can fall out. Thought-provoking. So obviously it means provoking thought, making you think about the topic. So what's the last thought-provoking film, book, video, post or article that you've read or watched? For me, the last thought-provoking video I've seen is by The Economist. It's called When Thoughts Control Machines, and it's about how the developing technologies allow us to use our thoughts, our minds, to control computers. That's quite mind-blowing and thought-provoking. The Times described it as incredibly compelling. Compelling is so interesting that you have to pay attention, absorbing. It comes from the verb to compel, which means to force. So you can say a compelling story or a compelling read, a compelling film as well. But it can also be used to mean persuasive, like a compelling argument, a compelling reason.
The second half of the novel, which is where she's on her own in the wilderness, I found the most compelling.
For me, what makes this exhibition so compelling...
It's much easier to tell a compelling story if you can make up whatever you want than if you have to stick to the truth.
Something that concentrates on telling a dynamic and compelling story.
Affinity is an eerie and utterly compelling ghost story.
This is an absolutely compelling story.
Its relationship is strengthening. I think there's compelling arguments for that.
And they also use a modifier, incredibly, which shows how compelling it is. Other interesting modifiers we can use are utterly or absolutely. Sunday Times called it heartbreaking. and it means extremely sad. So we typically say a heartbreaking story, or it's heartbreaking to see, how do you go on? You can also say to be heartbroken or broken-hearted, which usually has to do with losing someone or being left. Now, darkly funny is another example of using a modifier, darkly, and I think it's obvious what it means. We can also say darkly humorous or darkly comic, and that brings to mind dark or black comedy. Like, I know one old British comedy called Shaun of the Dead. It's like a parody on zombie films. Do you know any darkly funny films? Here's another poster with more glorification from the media. And here we've got Blissfully Brilliant. Blissfully is like extremely. Blisteringly funny. Blisteringly, also like extremely. But mind the collocation. It's best to, if you want to use that and like maybe write it in an essay, learn the whole collocation and don't split, don't mix them up. I quite like the word electrifying. It means extremely exciting. So an electrifying performance. I think it goes particularly well to describe concerts. They gave an electrifying performance. And hilarious is the last word, and it means extremely funny, like a hilarious joke, situation, or a person. And you can put it on the same shelf where you've got amusing, funny, and entertaining.
It's an electrifying performance.
Visionary, remarkable, and electrifying performance.
More heartfelt, hilarious, based on an...
And so the first time you saw her, I heard was a hilarious story. So funny.
So guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned some new advanced vocabulary to talk about your favorite films, books, performances, and anything else that you find interesting. So yeah, let me know. Cheers. Bye.